Welcome back to the Weekly Driver podcast. My name is James Rea. I'm an automotive columnist for Bay Area News Group, and I publish the website TheWeeklyDriver.com. My colleague, as always, is Bruce Aldrich, and today we have on a guest, Herman James, who I've only met briefly once. We met at a meetup group about blogging and podcasts and so forth, and we talked a little bit. But Herman is a vintage car collector, and he has one of the famous or infamous, depending upon how you look at it, Z cars. So welcome to our podcast, Herman, and how you doing today? And could you introduce us to your car?
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. As you said, Herman James here. I've been collecting and building cars and flipping cars for roughly close to, 20 years. I'm 34 years old, and I've had about 20 cars in my life.
Oh, my, you're obsessed.
Well, I grew up with a father that was a mechanic, so...
I see.
You know,
that helps, yes.
He taught me that you just buy them, build them, flip them, and drive them, and that's how you can afford cars that you couldn't afford otherwise.
Yes.
So it's true, and it holds true to this day. So my most recent car that I've got is probably one of my favorites, and it's a 1974 Datsun 260Z. I ended up picking up this car because the story behind it was I was looking for a car to go to Hot August night. And I figured if I'm going to go, I might as well be shunned by the time I get there by bringing a Japanese car to an American car show.
Yep, that'll do it, won't it? Exactly.
Well said, sir. Well said.
So I bought that one. My father and I planned on fixing it up and kind of taking it out there. Unfortunately, he did not survive cancer and kind of going with that one for it. So now it has been turned into a tribute build for my dad. So
fantastic.
It's not too bad. I'll keep it around now for that. The idea behind the car initially was to find a car that was inexpensive to purchase and able to build out correctly and have fun with doing, and potentially make it essentially a street legal drag car that would be able to be fast enough for my speed desire, but not fast enough to catch the attention of the police.
So what did you put a different motor in there, or is it the 6-liter straight six in that thing?
It still has the matching numbers original inline six. And that was just by sheer coincidence. I ended up purchasing the car off of Craigslist years ago, and it was in Colfax, California.
Yes.
And when I purchased it, the gentleman told me that the engine was blown on it. The original one, they swapped it out, and it had been modified off of Datsun parts for a while. So I assumed I was picking up a clunker. And then I went up there, grabbed it, and the gentleman told me about 8 years ago now that if I bought the 260, I had to take the parts car 260 as well. It was non-negotiable. So I figured, you're going to give me two cars for the price of one. I think at the time I paid $1,500 for both the cars.
Wow.
So there was two cars, two transmissions, two engines, all parts were there, and then extras. And it turned out that the original engine actually just had a blown head gasket.
Oh, little different than, blown motor, huh?
Yeah, a little different.
Completely different. It took a little bit of some lubrication, 2x4, and a hammer to break apart the piston and have it actually move perfectly fine. And I had a gentleman here in Sacramento, Gary Cook, actually rebuilt the engine for me. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him, but he's a vintage racer.
No, I'm not.
Oh, yeah. He does the vintage classic races in his Series 1 240 and does vintage races in his replica Shelby Cobra.
Oh, very good. Well, he's a knowledgeable guy. Hey, what could our listeners, if they are looking for a Z, probably any used car, what are you looking for? What are some bad spots, especially on a Z? Rust is one.
The Z's in particular, the battery tray is always going to be corroded. I don't think I've found one, except for the one I have, that didn't have battery acid just extremely rotting away the firewall The floors are extremely bad as well. Even mine had a 2x4 in the floor that they just rhino lined over the top and bottom of it.
Wow.
That's a quick fix.
Yeah.
I've heard of fiberglass. I didn't know you rhino lined them.
That's something.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
they were good. It was fun.
Okay.
you, since you mentioned your father, Bruce's father's passed away. My dad passed away a long time ago. Bruce's father helped Bruce, and now Bruce has his father's vintage Volkswagen. My dad really wasn't a car guy, but we had lots of different cars. So at what age did you start working with your dad? And when you work on the car now or other cars you've had, what kind of memories do you have of working on cars with your dad?
I would say I started working on cars when I was about 8 years old with my dad. He actually got in a car accident, and his old, I think it was 85 Malibu. And he ended up having to fuse the vertebrae in his neck so he couldn't get under cars.
Oh, boy.
And my father's, we'll call it want to teach me to work on cars was there. It was more of my dad's cheapness of not wanting to pay someone to do his oil change. I really think so.
Okay.
So at that age, I ended up working on cars with my dad and kind of working that. He was a chassis mechanic. So worked on a lot of cars that were being put on the stretchers and kind of getting squared back out. So since then, I have actually been able to surpass my father's knowledge and been doing engine swaps and building things out since then. So I'd say a majority of the time when I'm working on cars, a lot of the good memories come out of my father trying to tell an 8-year-old where to do things and how to put things in places. And then because my hands were so small at that age, they're bigger now, hopefully.
Yes.
But I could get my hands in places he couldn't. And so I became his, honestly, just a hand. Reach this, grab this, hold this. So
that's great.
It's been fun.
What kind of shop do you have and tools? Where are you at? Do you have at somebody's shop or you have in your garage?
Actually, no. I do everything out of my own garage. When I have the ability to, I call some friends and see if I can get some of their lifts or get on a lift. But a majority of the work we do is out of our garages with our own engine pullers and kind of doing everything out of there. So the shop in my garage, it is fully equipped. The house I purchased had what they call the bonus room in the garage, and they put a closet in there. So I've converted the entire closet into holding, I think I've got 6 toolboxes full of everything I can possibly need. And if I don't have it, I've got enough friends that will happily drive over and work on someone else's car to get out of their own garage.
That's great.
So it's like a hobby thing, and you got a group of friends that help and assist, and that's the way it should be done.
Yeah, it's a nice hobby that has paid me pretty well. I don't think I've ever lost money on any car that I've ever built or sold. It's been a fun project. I think the only time I've ever got called out for the sale that I did that someone else noticed was when I ended up having a 1971 Delta 88 Royale convertible, and I didn't like the carpet on the doors, so I took Crown Royal bags and made an entirely new insert for those gigantic doors to replace the carpet. And someone took the car that they bought from me and then flipped it. I think they were asking for $10,000 more than I sold to them for on eBay. And people just noticed the Crown Royal bags that I put on the door, which made me laugh because that does feel like it would be a 70s vibe, crushed purple velvet. But
yes. Now, before we go any further, you have another job, and you also have a podcast, the Rant with Herman James. And what do you do full time? You seem like you're a busy guy. What's going on in your world?
I am. For my daily life, I'm actually an insurance underwriter for commercial insurance and contractors. And so that takes up a majority of what I do when I'm not there. I do run the podcast, The Rant with Herman James and Friends, where it is a lot of ranting about daily life and activities, kind of the things that get under our skin on a regular basis, and it's a nice kind of venting and therapeutic session for myself and our friends to kind of let things off our chest. And it's gotten rather big, actually. We've just been in New Zealand. We just got some recordings in Australia, North Korea, South Korea. So it's been pretty cool.
That's great. Now, I just as a way of a compliment, I really like the layout of the podcast site and how you have different listings for sponsors and to contact you and things you're up to. I very much like a clean layout, so it's very straightforward, and I like it a lot.
Well, thank you very much. I try to do as much as I can with as little as possible, kind of the way I work on engines as well. When it comes to doing a website, I'm not a website designer. Thankfully, GoDaddy actually has a really easy way of doing things, and kind of does the layout for me. And then I have enough friends that do the internet kind of web designs that can tell me that I've done something completely wrong.
Yes.
And I guess it's a fortunate thing that they don't hold back or sugarcoat it.
Yes.
So I hear it directly from the source right off the bat.
I listened to a couple of your rants, and now you didn't sugarcoat anything. what would you rant about your the Z car? If there's some engineering piece or this or that you don't like, or was dumb, or doesn't work right?
The only major thing I have wrong, or had wrong, I've fixed it now, with my Z was the stock SU carbs. I've never had an issue where I was getting essentially percolation of the fuel, and we'll assume percolation. So my first time I took the car out after we built the engine and rear end and painted it and done all the work to it, I drove it from Sacramento to San Diego for Z-Con. And I think it was, honestly, a week after the paint drive. And
that's one good way to shake a car down, huh? Drive it 500 miles or whatever it is.
It was good. We did fine until I got to Bakersfield. And so we thought that in Bakersfield I was getting percolation because it's too hot and all the gas is evaporating before it's getting to the bowl. It turns out the only other people that have had this same issue were the folks at Z Therapy that actually rebuild the carbs, and they had it happen to their race car. The needle and seat weren't big enough to actually put enough fuel in the bowl, so that was starving my engine. That would have been nice to know how to kind of adjust that or have the issue a while back.
Yes, yeah.
But there was no internet forums. There was no one I could talk to that had the same issue. So that was probably the only issue I had, and that actually lasted for about a year and a half, 2 years, till I could figure out what's going on. I actually called Z Therapy to see the cost of them rebuilding it, and they told me right off the bat, don't worry about that, don't do it. And so I did what a normal weekend warrior would do and pulled out the needle and seat, put it on a vise, drilled it out a little bit bigger, then I washed off and put it back in, and works perfectly fine. But yeah, that was the bane of my existence for a year.
Wow. I've heard they actually have aftermarket manifolds that like so you can put a Holley carburetor on those things to get rid of all that SU stuff. The multiple carburetors.
Yeah, they've got the 3 deuces you can put on there, the little trumpets. You can do the Webers. Was a big upgrade back in the time, and still people are putting the Weber carburetors on there. The engine actually had that when I first got it. The issue was that they were using downdraft over carburetors, and with the hood clearance on it, I think you had about a half to a quarter of an inch clearance between the top of the downdraft and the engine itself. So they were running it super rich because at regular percentages, it didn't have enough oxygen. Side drafts were great in there, but the downdrafts just choked the engine so much.
Herman, I've never seen the car. We haven't seen the car, but the picture looks like it's a beautiful looking car from the image that you provided. But early in the podcast, you mentioned that you're 34 years old and you've had about 20 cars. So,
yes.
could you take us through a few other ones a few other vehicles you've had, and some of your other favorites, or some of your lesser favorites, perhaps as well?
Sure. My first car was a 1988 BMW 320i Euro spec car. So I blame my father wholeheartedly for getting me into the import world right off the bat. He purchased the car as a daily driver to get to and from work for him. and then I purchased it from him. And that was the first time I had ever tried to drive a manual that was a 5-speed. And it was a beautiful car, unlike the American version where it had god-awful big rubber bumpers and 2 doors. This was a 4-door, very thin chrome bumpers, and there were no parts in the States, and no one knew how to equate how to find the parts for a European car in America. So that started off the frustration with me learning right off of that one.
Yes.
Hands down, probably the best car I've ever had was that one. But then again, I was 16, so I didn't really know. So,
Yes.
and my father, I also blame him or attribute him to my need for speed, if you will. He told me that there was no way I was getting out of the car until I learned how to go up all 5 speeds and down all 5 speeds. And we did it behind a hospital in my hometown that was in Petaluma, so it was a bare road. But the first time in that car, I did about 110 miles an hour.
Wow.
Going up and down speed.
That's the best way to learn.
Speed, so, yeah. After that one, I ended up having a Ford Ranger, which was not my favorite truck to have. It was kind of a gutless wonder. Let's see what I do after that one. After that, I ended up picking up 1992 Dodge Stealth Twin Turbo RT.
Those were good cars. That'd be worth some money now if you still had it.
It would be, except I saw Fast and the Furious, and I thought I was Paul Walker. And I learned that you can put a boost control knob into cars. Of course, a manual one because I couldn't afford a digital one. And all I did was take out the restrictors and the air valves, put in the boost control knob, turned it all the way up to 11, if you will, and I blew the cooling system twice.
Wow.
You blew the what?
The cooling system.
Oh, cooling system. Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
now with these cars you've had through the years, and including your current car, when you're driving, let's just say around town, around Sacramento area or the Bay Area, wherever you go, what kind of response have you gotten from people? Is it a lot of, hey, look at that, I've never seen that car before, or other comments that you've had from people who see that car because it's quite striking?
It is. I do get quite a bit of people doing the head turns, the gawking, and thumbs up and honking of horns. But I also get what I think is great to have people appreciate it. But I also get what I call the cop effect.
Yes.
Because people are looking at your car, they're also slowing down, which slows me down, which means I can't go very quickly to get around them.
I see.
I do get a lot of nice Porsche because people think they look like a Porsche.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Really? They confuse
Yeah.
them? They're that old that the newer generation hasn't seen enough of them to know what it is. Huh.
Correct. And then depending on who you want to talk to, it's Nissan, Datsun, but yeah.
Well,
No,
since you've had
it's a Datsun. It's a fair lady Datsun.
now since you've
Yeah.
had all these cars and you're about half our age, what do you have your eye on? If you have your eye on another car that's out there, or do you just peruse Craigslist and eBay and hear through friends what might be out there, or do you have something specific in mind that you want in a year or two?
When I'm looking at them, I do typically look at Craigslist to kind of see what's out there or offer up to kind of see what's in the market for it. But I also do look at seeing what is smog exempt so that I can kind of tool it and play with it because I don't like the computers too much right now, even though they're supposed to be fantastic and able to tune. I never got raised or educated in that manner for it. As of right now, I am looking, essentially, if I can find it, I would like to actually pick up either Chevelle or Nova.
Great.
From the late 60s or early 70s or?
Early 70s fastbacks.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Sure. And that strikes your fancy because?
I think they were great all-around vehicles. I like the style of them. I love the performance of them. It just, to me, I think it's a nice, beautiful lined car. I'm also a huge, huge fan of 70s boats. So unfortunately, they're just not accessible and they're not realistic to purchase. When people are giving you like a 70 Nova goes for sale on Craigslist that is completely gutted and rusted and it's a shell of a car and they're asking $10,000.
The Weekly Driver podcast gets support from AmericanTrucks.com. Visit www.americantrucks.com. Yes. Well, we went, Bruce and I and another friend recently went to Pacific Coast Dream Machines in Half Moon Bay. And we noticed, at least I noticed, and I think my buddies noticed as well, that the prices of some of the cars that just seemed very high. I can't give a good example, maybe Bruce can, but the asking prices on some of the cars, 50, 60 grand, and we just thought there's no way that 40 Econoline van is worth 50 grand, you know. So that wasn't a perfect example, but the prices do seem to be skyrocketing. And I remember about a year ago we went to Mecum Auction at Monterey Auto Week, and there was a vintage Volkswagen van, the 21 window.
Yeah.
That was they were asking 100 grand for that vehicle.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I would assume it's got a lot to do with what people's perception and what's put on TV.
yes.
Sure.
That van in particular, I know, is a limited van, but they also featured that, I think, a year or so ago on Gas Monkey Garage.
Oh, okay.
And so that was, so people think that their own whatevers are going to go that high.
Yes.
And now since they put the 240Z actually was able to go into the Concours d'Elegance,
Oh.
now everyone's actually jacking up their prices on their cars, rust bucket or not, assuming that theirs is equally as important as their first generation Concours d'Elegance.
Wow.
Gotcha.
Hey, I didn't earn anything, but I owned a 75 280Z. It was a fuel injected car, but as my memory of it, I mean, I loved the car. It was nice to drive, but it was one of the worst cars I've ever owned. As far as I had, stuff like the door handles fell off, the crank mechanism for the windows. I had to take the door apart to fix those. Just crazy stuff. Just fell apart on them. Mine was the worst car I've ever owned. But it was at the same time, it's probably the most fun, so.
Sure.
Yeah, I think probably the most fun car I've had to drive and build, and it equally would fall apart on me here and there, was I forget if it was 67 or 69. I don't remember what year it was, the first year of the 12-volt system and the last year of the all-steel dash, but it was a Volkswagen Beetle.
Oh, okay.
And that thing was a blast. My e-brake popped off as soon as I pulled it. The window cranks didn't want to work fully, but it's the most easily workable car I've ever worked with. It's also probably the slowest car I've ever driven, because going downhill, coming from the Bay Area into Fairfield, and I'm floored. It's a 1,600 cc engine that I just rebuilt, dual rubber carburetors on it, everything. I'm doing 84 miles an hour. That's as fast as things going to go.
I can remember having a mid 1980 something, 85, 86 Saab sedan, and I was in a friend's, and you closed the door. It sounded great, and I just loved the solid feel of it. And that was the worst car I've ever owned, because there was a little $20 part on the radiator that froze, and every time it go in, it's that $15 part. You need that radiator thermostat, and it's $15. But if you don't replace it now, your whole car is going to be done in a short while. But I love the look of that old sedan, but it was just the typical. It was the typical sob story. It just was
Sob story, yeah.
Yeah, always a sob story. So. So what else? If you were looking into the crystal ball, Herman, what cars do you think, to put you on the spot, might be considered collector's cars 5 or 10 years from now? What might a speculator have on the horizon?
If you're going to go for in the horizon coming up next 5 to 10 years, if we're looking for older cars, you're looking for new ones. I think the best new production that's come out is got to be the Skylines being produced back here in America. And now that they're allowing the 85s to come over and everyone's having the ability to build those, I think it's great. I think sticking with that motif, even Subarus, the WRX full class of it, is a wonderful car. They do limited production. Those are for sure going to go back up on it. Unfortunately, as much as I love American cars, I can't get behind a lot of what's come out for them. I don't see it doing as great for it. Unless you look at those limited productions of the Demons and You've got some of the Hellcats coming out, but it's hard to say that the American cars are doing as great as a lot of the foreign cars have been doing.
There you go. Now, we don't know much about you in terms of if you're a family guy or a single guy, and if you're married and you had a son or a daughter, would you lead them into the life of debauchery that your father led you into, or if you do have a son or a daughter in the future, would you have them stay away from that?
I would definitely gear them toward working on their own cars.
Yes.
The fiance and I do not have any kids as of yet, but we will.
Yes.
And as I say on the rant all the time, my cheapness supersedes the majority of what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I also placate to my knowledge and my lack of knowledge and the ability to go on YouTube and pretty much figure everything out now, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
And I think working on your own vehicles, working on your own homes, saves you money to go do things you want to do, to take that drive down Highway 1. Because you built the car, now you can pay what are we at now, $4 a gallon here in Sacramento for regular gas, and I'm putting premium in the Z, so that's costing me about $65 to fill up my gas tank.
Yes. So you're a big DIY, whatever it is. You want to work in the garden, you want to work at your house, your car. That's your thing. Teach people
100%.
how to.
So what do you think about all the computerization in cars? That, if you had, would you ever buy something after 90 or something with all computerized, or we stay away from them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my daily driver is a '99 Subaru Legacy Outback wagon.
I had one.
So, yeah, I love the car, and it is a lot. It is just, I've had to do so much to it to get it to go, but I know how to fix it, so I can, and I do. My hesitation with the electronics is the fact that I'm not educated well enough in it, and there's too much that can go wrong with a sensor or a solenoid or a wire or grounding out somewhere that I can't see. So to me, it's literally just fear. I don't know it. And if you go on YouTube and try to find it, there's 14 different possibilities. So mine's a fear. The biggest question I have coming out in the very current future is going to be who's working on the electric cars, who's working on the Teslas, the Volt, and all those, because it's not a fuel-inject engine. And I don't know if that's a regular mechanic or if it's especially because the guys that built the Teslas in the factory are now charging an arm and a leg to work on Teslas outside of warranty.
Yes.
Sounds like something you got to get into then. There's your calling, electric cars.
That's right. Hey, Herman, we want to thank you for the last 25, 30 minutes on our Weekly Driver podcast. You're a great guest. You have obviously a lot of passion for what you do, and someday I'm going to see that. If we see you at another meetup group or maybe at the WordPress conference, I don't know if you're into that later on this year. I'll hit you up for a drive in your car. How's that?
That sounds great. Yeah, I can always bring the car out to the meetup, or you can always find me at Cars and Coffee.
Okay.
We have Cars and Coffee in Folsom as well, and I'm one of the guys that brings the Z's after that.
Okay, great. Hey, Herman James, don't forget to visit his site, the podcast, The Rant with Herman, and you're going to get some rants. As Bruce said, he listened to a couple of them in there. You don't pull any punches. You're out there with your opinions, which is great, and good for you on the success of that. So thanks for your time today. We appreciate your being a guest on the Weekly Driver podcast. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for not going off on us with a rant.
Take care, guy. Thank you.
Right, see ya.
Bye-bye.
Take care. All right, bye-bye.
The Weekly Driver podcast gets support from AmericanMuscle.com, your late model Mustang and F-150 authority, bringing you the hottest products and top-notch customer service for over a decade. No one makes it easier to modify your ride. Visit AmericanMuscle.com today.